Yep, okay, Chair, ready to go.
Lovely. Good afternoon and welcome to today's special meeting for Place Scrutiny Committee. It's Thursday, the 2nd of February. I'll start with item number 1, apologies for absence. I don't believe we've had any apologies from committee members, but I have had apologies from Cabinet member Paul Griffiths. I now just want to allow members to introduce themselves. So if I go down the chat bar, one moment. So we've got a visiting councillor, Councillor Bromfield, if you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Hi, Faye Bromfield, County Councillor for Llangibby Vale.
Thank you. Councillor Chandler.
Hi, Councillor Ian Chandler, member for Llantylia Cresceni.
Councillor Emma Bryn.
Hi, Councillor Emma Bryn, member for representing Wylesham Ward in Monmouth.
Councillor Davis.
Renowned da, Councillor Thomas David Davis, member for Llanvoice Fawr and Gyfeillion.
Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown, County Councillor for Shire Newton Ward and member of this committee. Good afternoon.
Councillor McConnell.
Afternoon, Councillor Sue McConnell of Cressonnan Ward and member of this committee.
Councillor Stevens.
Good afternoon, Councillor Maria Stevens, 7 Ward, Caldicot.
Councillor Strong.
Good afternoon, Councillor Jackie Strong, County Councillor for Cross Ward in Caldicot and a member of this committee. Thank you.
Councillor Callard.
Hiya, Councillor Ben Callard, member for Llanvoice Fawr and Gyfeillion and a member of this committee.
And Councillor Lucas.
Councillor Lucas from Osbaston Ward in Monmouth.
Okay. And I think that's all members. So I'd just like the Cabinet members to introduce themselves. So first I've got Councillor Garrick.
Councillor Rachel Garrick, Caldicot Castle Ward, portfolio holder for resources.
Lovely. And Councillor Sandals.
Prynawn da, thank you, Chair. County Councillor for Maker Eastern Yndy and Cabinet member with responsibility for engagement. Thank you.
And Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sarah Birch, Cabinet member for Inclusive and Active Communities and Ward member for Cantref Ward.
Lovely. And I'm Councillor Lisa Dimmock for Port Stewart Ward and I am chair of this select committee. Officers, Hazel, Robert, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, Hazel Isla, Scrutiny.
Hi, Robert McGowan, Policy and Scrutiny.
And Jonathan Davis, I see, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jonathan Davis, Head of Finance.
Okay, Peter Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Executive and Section 151 Officer of the Council.
Okay. Are there any other officers that would like to introduce themselves? No? Okay. So, oh, yeah. Who is that?
Sorry, Nikki Wellington, CYP Support Services.
Welcome, Nikki. Did I see Carl there? There you are, Carl. You can't hide from me.
Carl Tewig, Head of Neighbourhood Services.
Lovely.
And Tyrone. Oh, sorry. Go on, let Dave go first.
Thank you, Ty. Afternoon, everybody. Dave Loader, Central Finance. Thank you.
And Tyrone? We'll save the best till last.
Oh, thank you. Tyrone Stokes, Finance Manager for Social Care and Health Directorate. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, so public open forum. I don't believe we've got any members of the public wanting to speak, so I'll hand over to Councillor Garrick for item number 4, budget scrutiny of the budget proposals for 23-24.
Apologies, it always helps if I unmute myself before I start. Thanks very much, Chair. I've bought a presentation if you're willing to let me go through that. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. It should appear very soon. Can you
I can
see
see
this?
that. Members in the
Brilliant.
chamber, can you see? Yeah, lovely. Okay.
So apologies to anybody who's been to any of the public meetings or the other scrutiny committees. It is the same presentation, so I'm sorry, you are going to listen to me again. So in order for us to talk about the budget, we need to talk about the context of the budget and the financial contents specifically. So 2022 has been an unprecedented year, and that's what has pushed cost pressures. We haven't seen levels of inflation in the history of Monmouthshire County Council in this way. You have to go back to the 1970s prior to our existence as a county council in order to find levels of inflation like this. That also needs to be put against the backdrop of below needs funding for councils for over a decade. So when we talk about inflation, there's different things. Brexit has driven food and raw material prices up for the country. The pandemic itself has increased prices, and it's also put additional service pressures onto the council, particularly in the areas of care and homelessness. OPEC Plus set oil production at a very low level this year after oil prices fell to record lows of below zero. That was then exacerbated by war in Ukraine and gas prices following that trend. We're also dealing with a spiraling job market throughout the country that's particularly pressurizing for us in areas such as care, where we have people towards the bottom of the income earning spectrum and who are looking to maximize their earnings where they can. So when we import people into our workforce from other counties, they're looking to travel less and obviously earn as much as they can because they, just like everybody else, are affected by the cost of living crisis. So that brings us to where we are in terms of actual pressure on the council. So our cost pressures for providing our services for 23 to 24 is an additional £26 million. So that consists of £11.9 million of pressures on services. So for us to provide the same services that we provided in the current financial year, next financial year, we anticipate that will cost us a further £11.9 million. We also have energy costs. That's driving a £4.5 million increase in terms of cost pressure. And then we've got £7 million of pay awards. That's mostly from 23 to 24, but there's some overplay going there from the 2022 pay awards. In addition to that, we have to service borrowing that we've committed to as a council, and those increases for our treasury costs are at £3.2 million. So councillors in the room will mostly be aware of this breakdown. This is also the public pack, but it's useful to get a visual on where our expenditure goes. You'll see at the back here in blue. I don't know, can you see my pointer if I use that on the presentation? Brilliant. So this blue piece here, 32% of our budget, that's children and young people. That's 59 million estimated costs for 2023 to 2024. It's followed very closely by our social care and health areas with 31% of our budget, and that's at 58.4%. We then take a big drop to communities in place with about 13% of our budget, £24.1 million. We then go into precepts and levies at 8.6 million, Council tax reduction scheme is at 7.4 million. Borrowing costs 7.1 million. Resources 7 million. Mon Life 4.9. Democracy, planning and people, that's 4.8 million. Policy, scrutiny and customer service at 3.2 million. And corporate management and insurance at 1.3 million. I'm quite happy to bring these slides up at any point during questions as well, if that's helpful. So if we break down that additional 11.9 million of service pressures that I talked about, what we're looking at is the biggest factor here is £4.4 million in children's social care. It's a volatile area. Children's places are a scarcity, and we have increasing demand and complexity on those placements as well. As well as that, we're looking at inflationary pressures and staff shortages when we're trying to find people to work in that area. That's followed by adult social care, and that's at 1.8 million additional pressure. So that's brought about by ageing population. We're all familiar with Mama should be having an older average age and an older demographic. And we've also got post-pandemic demand where people have experienced COVID and need additional social care and help, or increased complexity for those who are already receiving care. So Welsh Government brought in new policy and legislation on homelessness during the pandemic. That's meant the councils need to up their game in how we provide services for people and ensuring that people are not on the streets. That means we are housing more people, particularly in temporary accommodation, and that is giving us a forecasted £1.9 million of pressure. I'm very sorry, everybody. My voice is starting to go. I've been doing this presentation for about 2 weeks now. We got increases in anticipated demand for children with additional learning needs. So that's increased support for placement costs. We're also seeing more children needing with additional learning needs, and that's falling across a wider age range than it used to. So you've got more coming into the service there as well. In terms of costs for recycling and waste, that's going to cost us about £200,000 additionally this year. That's more around haulage and waste treatment as prices in energy goes up and supply and inflation goes in. That's costing us more to service. We're also seeing a bit of a fall in trade waste income for the council. In terms of our passenger transport and fleet, again, we've seen some extreme costs pressures in terms of inflation, fuel, and we're also seeing increased pupil numbers. So we're anticipating, I think that's £612,000 for passenger transport and fleet. So we're then looking at income shortfalls across leisure and outdoor education, civil parking enforcement, and investment property income. That's at about 800, no, not 800 million, sorry, that would be devastating, £800,000 shortfall. And then in terms of community safety, we're anticipating a need for additional funding of about £100,000. But as we're all aware, we need to strike a balance on our budget. We need to provide our services, and we need to provide that within our means. So we're aware that our services, when you add up things such as increased costs for fuel, treasury, etc., comes to about £26.6 million, or a 14% increase, which is thereabouts the level of inflation that we've seen throughout 2022. Obviously, we have income increases, so we're looking at a £15.7 million increase. That covers 7.5% of that 14%. That's funded through government grant, anticipated council tax increase, and proposed charges for discretionary services. We have the third lowest reserves in Wales, and it's difficult for us to therefore utilise reserves to bridge that gap. You will see councils such as Caerphilly Council, Rhondda Cynon who are bigger beasts than Monmouthshire and do hold much more substantial reserves, looking to dip into their reserves to bridge their funding gaps for this year. That's not something that we feel is possible in this year. Therefore, we're holding reserves as contingency for risk realisation this year. So that means we've got 11.4 million left to cover, which we're proposing we do through service changes and savings. We genuinely believe, as an administration, that our budget needs to be policy and priority led, that we're protecting the most vulnerable and trying to build Monmouthshire to be the place that we all want to live in. As a cabinet, we've taken this particularly seriously. We've gone through over days upon days upon days, line by line, each proposal that we received from the senior lead team, and we've considered every single proposal. Some we have said we don't believe is appropriate for our council and our residents, but we do understand and we do need to make decisions. And these are very hard decisions that we all need to make as a council on where we can actually make savings to bring to that £11.4 million of savings. So I'm going to give you a high level run through of what we're bringing in. You've also got the full budget report as well, which gives you every single mandate and breakdown of the proposed savings. So, individual school budgets, we're proposing a 5% net increase in school budgets next year. But that still leaves a gap in the projected anticipation of what schools need for the next year. We therefore will need schools to provide a 2.8% efficiency saving. We're anticipating that schools will use reserves in order to bridge that gap. That gap itself is there after we as a council make a full provision for pay and increases and energy increases. However, we still have a significant gap and we are looking to make a further £300,000 saving in the children and young persons area, bearing in mind that it's the individual school budgets that make up most of the large part of that £58 million that we discussed in the pie chart earlier. So, we're the last council in Gwent that fully subsidises Gwent Music Service. We're proposing that we do align with other councils and reduce that subsidy. So we may see a reduction from Gwent Music in their ability to provide class-based provision, and we anticipate increases in charges through Gwent Music Service to parents and caregivers for children's individual music lessons. However, music is an incredibly important part of our heritage and culture in Wales, and we're therefore providing a support fund for pupils from low-income families to be able to continue to pursue music tuition. We also provide free breakfasts for every child in the county that needs or wants one on a school day. That will continue. We also provide heavily subsidised breakfast clubs, which provide much needed wraparound childcare for working parents and carers. At the moment, that's £1 per session. For contrast, if I send my child to an evening wraparound care session, that costs, I think it's £6.95 per session at the moment. We're proposing that we increase that charge to £2 for the childcare element only of a wraparound childcare session in the mornings. We're also looking to use grant funding, which would offset proposed reductions in staffing levels in our school psychology service. That's where we're looking to withdraw place positions which we haven't been able to recruit against. We're also looking to use grant funding for support service for children with additional learning needs. So moving on to social care. We're looking to increase our adult social care budget by 2.5%, which is 1 million. That means we need to find proposed savings against the estimated cost of running that service of £2 million.
Sorry, could I just interject? Apologies, Councillor and Chair. I just wondered whether the presentation could focus on the remit of the Place Scrutiny Committee and not cover what was done in the People Scrutiny Committee.
I didn't really receive that request previously, so it'd be difficult for me to change the presentation at the moment. I'm not sure where to go with that one. Would it be okay to continue with what I have?
I understand what Councillor Chandler's saying, but I think I'm happy for you to continue, Councillor Garrick. I think that's only fair. So yes, please do.
I'm very sorry, but thank you very much for the understanding. Okay, so I'll try and give you a bit more of a whistle-stop tour so you get the time to focus on the place itself. So we're looking to resize our direct care for adult social care and looking to rebalance our house and our in-house versus our external provision. And we're looking to we will be introducing a falls prevention and early intervention service, which is designed to prevent the number of people that we would anticipate would need to go into nursing and residential care. So we're looking at prevention at an early stage. For children's services, the increase is 3.4 million, that's 19%. That means we still need a 1.4 million of proposed service savings there. So we're looking to reevaluate the processes and decisions that we make along high cost placements, and we're looking to review family time service development and wider structures and service operating costs. We're also looking to make a £300,000 saving in the remodelling of our learning disability and mental health teams. That's going to invoice a decrease in, it's going to involve, sorry, not invoice, I've clearly got finances on the brain now. That will involve a decrease in team management hours. So let's move on to the leisure and cultural services. So we're proposing that we will increase the budget for Mon Life by 22%. There's some significant pressures within Mon Life. We've seen lower uptake in gym memberships than anticipated coming out of the pandemic. We're also seeing some intense pressures in terms of energy costs when you think about what we do in Mon Life, as well as running our cultural heritage, such as our museums, the castle in my ward. We're also running our leisure centres, and pools are significant energy cost for the council. We're looking to make £600,000 in savings here, and that will be around impacting staffing hours and looking at opening hours with an analysis of when people use our services and looking to contract hours around quiet times. We're very committed to keeping our services open, particularly around leisure centres. They're an incredibly important part of our community. It links to our well-being, and it also links to our ability to keep people well and healthy and reducing pressure on areas such as social care going forward. You'll be familiar with our Nature Isn't Neat scheme and our No Mow May approach, where we leave our mowing schedules throughout May and then look to cut down in June. We're looking to reduce our mowing schedule further, expanding the Nature Isn't Neat piece, and that's there to reduce costs and increase biodiversity. We're also looking to make savings of about 1.3 million across the council buildings, vehicles and fleet maintenance. So we're looking at reducing maintenance to essential maintenance. We're looking to decarbonise to the tune of £714,000. So that's reducing energy consumption across the council estate. And we're looking to drive down fleet maintenance costs by reducing our operational fleet and our mileage. We're also looking, once we've talked about service redesign, we're also looking to increase our income from the discretionary charges that we ask our residents to pay for the discretionary services that we provide. So what we're asking is for residents to pay a fair price for the services that we provide. So you're looking at things, well, one of the most concerned areas that we've heard about is garden waste, but we're also looking at car parking fees and other areas. In line with our wellbeing objectives, as well as keeping open our leisure centres, we're committed to keeping open our community hubs and libraries. We're looking to make 300,000, not 300,000, 300,000, sorry. So that's a £300,000 saving around community hubs, libraries and contact centres. So those costs we're looking to make by looking at how much we keep our libraries open, and again, looking at our usage, our times of usage, and considering the hours that we open for. We're also looking to reduce our contact centre costs, which would mean reducing the number of employees within that area. Unfortunately, that may have a knock-on impact of making it a longer wait to be able to be answered by the council when you phone them up. We're also looking there into the reduction of the discretionary business rates piece as well. I'm sorry, I've gone ahead. Let's move on to council tax. So our proposal for council tax, and bear in mind, this comes out of the modelling and where we are in terms of what we believe is tolerable for Monmouthshire in terms of service redesign, and also taking into account income that we generate, as well as the Welsh Government grant. So we're proposing at that point to bridge the remaining gap with a 5.95% increase in council tax. That's significantly below inflation. It will provide much needed funds to allow us as a council to continue to provide services. And again, we will maintain our council tax reduction fund, which provides support for low-income households so they don't bear the brunt of council tax increases. What that means in real terms, if we take the example of your average person living in a Band D house, that means an increase of £1.69 per week, or £7.32 per month, based on a 12-month repayment schedule. So it's important to remember as well. When we talk about that, we're talking about the Monmouthshire element of that. So we're not talking about a town or community precept or the Police and Crime Commissioner precept. So let's talk about risks. We're all aware, having seen it come through, that the budget that was in place for 2022 to 2023, due to the unprecedented nature of 2022, hit £9 million worth of risk realisation within 4 months, which was unprecedented and quite a blow to the council in terms of having to put in place a recovery plan for that. Now, we're seeing signs of changes in the economy, and indications are that inflation will start to dip over 2023. We therefore don't believe the risks are likely to realise to the tune of 9 million in 2022. We're therefore proposing that we hold £3 million of reserves to cover risk realisation in year. And again, this is based on our financial modelling, and our experience. So this is where we think we should be holding reserves. In terms of the capital programme, so overseeing maintenance and enhancement of our estate and asset base, so our schools, our council offices, not our officers, our community hubs, our leisure centres, our county farms, our highways and road infrastructure. We're maintaining that input. So we're looking at tackling our long-term challenges in the communities, which should align with our draft corporate and community plan. The significant areas of investment for the next year from the capital budget are, as you're more than likely aware, the new 3 to 19 school in Abergavenny and also the care home being built in Crick Road this year. Just to let you know what we're doing in terms of the consultation piece, we've been running since the 19th of January with consultation. You're the third scrutiny committee that we're bringing this to, obviously, and we've done a number of community engagements events throughout the county and online. There is a budget landing page on our website where the community can access the budget proposals. There's an online survey and there's a social media campaign to encourage people to participate. Our plan is for the council tax setting and the final budget proposals to come to council on the 2nd of March. And at this point, I will stop and hand back to you, Chair, if that's okay for questions.
Thank you, Councillor Garrick, and well done. I know what it's like to have a sore throat at times. I bet you'll be glad when this budget comes to an end.
Not as glad as my tonsils, Chair.
So the hand up facility is now in the chat bar. So members, if you could please raise your hand so I know that you want to come in. Councillor Davis, I understand that you've got a question.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues. Let me begin by saying that I don't envy the choices confronted by the Cabinet member. I would be the first to recognise that these are exceptionally challenging times for local government, further compounded, of course, by what are significant inflationary pressures and global economic headwinds. And confronted with those challenges, I think the Cabinet member is to be applauded to an extent in at least attempting to navigate those challenges and to present a draft budget for our consideration today. She's been confronted with some quite unsavoury choices, to say the least, and for that she has my sympathy. In holding this budget to scrutiny, I propose, if I may, Chair, to hold it up against the Council's own draft corporate plan, and in particular, in my line of questioning today, to focus on whether this draft budget meets the authority's own commitment to make Monmouthshire a greener place to live and work in. So if I could begin, Chair, I'd like to turn initially to the financial savings which are proposed for the neighbourhood service. What reassurance can the Cabinet member today provide this committee that these proposed reductions, particularly for the grounds maintenance operations, the cessation of the community improvement team as well, will not in any way undermine her authority's ambition to be a green place to live? From my perspective, I'm particularly concerned that these proposals will negatively impact upon the quality of life, particularly in our rural villages, which have historically, at least, have derived considerable benefit from the services offered by the community improvement team, and who've worked, as I'm sure she's aware, very closely with our community councils to add great value in the past. A second question related to that, if I may, Chair, is to ask the Cabinet member to further clarify, again, for the benefit of this committee and for those local residents who may be in the gallery or observing online, the scope of any proposed, and I quote, reconfiguration of the sweeping functions across the county, which again is referenced in black and white in the consultation document. Again, is the Cabinet member satisfied that any reconfiguration of said sweeping functions won't in any way undermine this authority's corporate objective to make a positive contribution towards addressing the climate and nature emergency. I'm sure many other members too would welcome that reassurance that any repurposing will not have that detrimental effect and in any way undermine this authority's ability to tackle what is a growing scourge of litter in particular across this county. We heard from MCC's own environmental health lead at a sister scrutiny committee only last week when responding to questions that instances of fly tipping, cases of littering had increased significantly in the past 12 months. So what reassurance can she provide to this committee that this fiscal settlement will allow continued and meaningful progress in tackling these significant challenges? And finally, on this theme of littering and fly tipping in particular, I was particularly surprised to learn that in the preceding financial year, if I've understood correctly, Monmouthshire was one of only a handful of authorities which failed to issue a single fixed penalty notice for littering across the county. And whilst I think the draft budget correctly, in my view, allocates additional funding for pursuing fixed penalty notices for unpaid car park charges, I can't see any such provision for appropriately resourcing a similar function to pursue those fixed penalty notices, particularly in the context of littering and fly tipping across this county. So can the Cabinet member first confirm whether such budgetary allocations were considered, and if so, why were they discarded in such a way? Chair, I do have some questions on other themes and topics, but I'm happy to perhaps pause there and to focus my initial salvo on these related issues as they pertain to the corporate objective of creating a greener place in which to live and work. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garrick, are you happy to come in there?
Sure. Unfortunately, we don't have Katrin, our member that would normally, our portfolio member that would normally answer that with us. Let's be clear on this. When we're talking about a greener place to live, we're committed to £750,000 of decarbonisation in this budget, which is the principal goal in terms of reducing environmental impact for our areas. We also got key pieces such as increasing biodiversity written into this budget. In terms of littering and sweeping, Carl, I believe you're in the chamber. Would you be able to give us an update from an officer perspective?
Yeah, happy to do that, Councillor and Chair.
Thank you.
I've copied down the points raised, so I'll try and briefly go through all of them. The reduction in the CIT team, so the Community Improvement Team, currently have two teams. One of them has already gone from the council service. We worked with prisoners from Prescoed, and it is getting more and more difficult to get those clients to come out and work with us, so it's putting pressure on the existing team. So there's one of them teams running now. What we want to do is push that work back into the general workforce to give the residents more cover, not less. It's more cover. It does mean the reduction of that team, but it does mean all of that work being pushed out across the wider grounds maintenance functions. Where we are seeing a reduction in mowing and cutting grass to do with the Nature Isn't Neat programme, we have a little bit more capacity there to do some of the other work around planting and doing more of that community type involvement. So that's one of the areas that we want to progress. It does make some savings, but actually we're hoping that it will be a benefit for residents rather than a disbenefit. The reduced mowing, currently we mow 14 times a year. The plan is to reduce that to 10 times a year. We'll continue to mow the areas where people use, so our green open spaces, we will cut paths through them. It won't be a complete everywhere gets 10 cuts. Some areas will still get 14. We want to keep that amenity space, but we also want to expand our Nature Isn't Neat programme. So that work will save money and hopefully free up some additional capacity to do some of that CIT work, as I said. So we're looking to reduce the mowing, but we're hoping it's not going to be overly poorly done throughout the county, and we'll make sure that the amenity areas are still open and able to be used widely. The repurposing of the sweeping functions is to provide a greater sweeping function. Currently, we have 2 part-time staff doing those functions, and then a litter picker. It's not the most efficient way of cleaning waste with a litter picker, so the idea would be to create, we would lose the part-time posts, but have a full-time sweeper on there. The sweeper is obviously more efficient than walking around with a litter picker, so we will get more work done with the sweeper than with the litter picker. But it does give saving in reducing those 2 part-time posts and pushing the litter picker more onto the mechanical sweeper. So we're hoping we're going to get cover there as well, and a little bit more in our town centres. Some of the town centres have also, the town councils have also bought into having expanded town teams, and that's given us more cover. Chepstow, Abergavenny particularly, we're seeing some great improvements there and want to work with the other town councils to get a similar approach going in those areas, backed up with more mechanical sweeping in those areas as well.
If I might just interject very briefly, Chair, I mean, that reassurance is helpful, and I appreciate that update. My only concern is by moving from to a mechanical solution, and I think, I'm paraphrasing here, but I think you use the expression to support our town centres. To what extent can this technology be applied to the more rural outposts of this county, including my own ward, which I have the pleasure of representing? And how fit for purpose is this mechanical solution to address what is a growing scourge of litter, particularly in our rural hamlets, particularly in the national park on the Blorange Road in my own ward? Would not a physical litter solution or collection solution be more effective in that context? I mean, any further words of reassurance around that I think would be welcome, both my own residents but across the county, I'm sure.
Yeah, sorry about that, Councillor. Yeah, there's no changes to the way that we manage sweeping in the rural areas and out of town areas. We've got 3 large mechanical sweepers that come out to those areas. The 3 small mechanical sweepers that currently do the town centres are parked up for some of the days where the current system isn't working. They will have more time to get out and support the wider through towns and villages. So we're hoping to see more of a mechanical cleanse. As you said, manual cleansing is much needed as well. We need to walk down. There are often cars blocking the pavements and roads, and we will still have manual sweepers. We're not looking to detract from the service. What we're hoping is that it's going to expand it. But the idea wasn't to decrease any of the provision beyond the town centres. So sorry for focusing on town centres. The fly tipping date, but I'll come back to you with. We haven't seen, or at least up until this point, I haven't been made aware of a large increase in fly tipping. Certainly the work that I've done in the past has shown a slight increase across the board, across Wales, but not at any level that is showing a trend at the moment. But I'll check on that data and come back to the committee with all of that data for the last year. The litter FPN, so we were in the process of getting a plan of how we would take a policy forward on issuing fixed penalty notices for litter, dog fouling, those low-level antisocial crimes. Welsh Government were pulling together a paper for their litter strategy, and we were hoping that it was going to be an all-Wales approach. We were hoping that rather than it being a council approach where people feel that they've been treated unfairly in Monmouthshire as opposed to Torfaen or as opposed to somewhere else, it would be an all-Wales approach with an all-Wales enforcement role coming from funded through Welsh Government. That hasn't happened yet, and we're still hopeful for that. I agree. You know, we've had many years now where we haven't issued fixed penalties for litter, and you know, it probably does need some bite now to take that forward. So yes. Hopefully that's covered all of the questions.
It has. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Carl. Councillor Davis, did you want to come back in there, or are you happy?
No, I think I've indulged the committee long enough. I'm happy to.
Okay. Thank you for your questions. Councillor Chandler.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got quite a few questions, but I might follow Councillor Davis's example and just give some of them now and maybe come back later. I've got a very basic question, which I think I'm probably feeling a little bit. It's probably an obvious answer. It's going to make me feel stupid. But in the Cabinet paper, Figure 1 gives a total expenditure of £311 million, but Figure 4 shows a total of expenditure of £208 million. I'm sure there's a very simple explanation for why there's a £100 million difference in those two tables, but it's not clear to the casual observer. And also, just while we're looking at that overview, it would be good if we could, if Councillor Garrett could let us know what would be the additional income, or for every 1% increase in council tax, what is the additional revenue that is gained by the council, just so we can get a sense of scale of some of these things. So those are a couple of sort of broad questions. Drilling down, if I'm looking at proposals Decarb 1 and 2, about savings through energy reduction of 772,000, clearly I'm greatly in favour of decarbonisation and reducing our energy footprint. But I suppose I've got some concerns about how robust some of those figures are. So the energy awareness campaign is projected to save £149,000, and that's based on a 5% saving across the board. I just wonder how that figure's been tested, why 5%, has there been any investigation of what previous efforts at energy reduction have done, or has it just been brought out of the air, and how predictable are those savings, and have we put in a margin of error? If I'm looking at that particular proposal, there is no margin of error put into that. Similarly, the lumped in with what's called decarbonisation is actually an increase in the money that we get from the solar farm, which strictly speaking is not decarbonisation of our existing energy footprint. It's just new income coming from an existing asset. That's flagged in the paper as uncertain, that figure of £150,000. I just wondered whether there'd been, again, what's that margin of error within that? What's the band in which we expect that to happen? And have we done any further investigation since this paper was drawn up to sort of try and firm up that figure? And then there's a number of things in this one and in others where there is a capital investment required, and it's actually quite hard sometimes to go back to the capital investment. So the pool covers, obviously, and the HVAC changes are going to predict to say 56k, but just the capital outlay for the pool covers alone is 120k. So again, looking at what's the return on investment, how many years before we get that money back. Similarly, with the additional walking routes, if we're looking at PTU 1 to 3 and 7, the home to school transport, those additional walking routes, again, great, have no problem with that, really good. But in that particular paper, it doesn't say, in order to achieve the £70,000, it doesn't say what is the capital investment required by the Highways Department in order to create those additional walking routes. Now, actually, I've dug further down and into about page 1,300 or whatever it is, and I've discovered that investment shown is 150k, but it would have been helpful if that had been in that paper there, because otherwise there's a danger of just transferring some of those costs. While I'm talking about home to school transport, the impacts I'm not quite sure are really talked about. So raising the price for concessionary travel, what's going to be the impact of that on car use, increased car use, and possibly reduced enrolment into sixth forms, as students might choose to go out of county for their sixth forms if the costs are going up. Similarly, about reverting to statutory distances for free school transport. Again, what is that? What's going to be the impact of that on car use? There's no assessment in the proposals for that, but also does it take into account where there are no available walking routes? because the figure that I see just implies that actually everybody is going to be paying and not qualifying for free transport because of a lack of walking routes. So I suppose those are some of my concerns there. If I'm looking at Mon Life, again, some of the savings there is just transferring, in the youth service, it's just transferring costs to primary schools. There is no saving, it's just actually shifting the budget from one area to another, and there's no real sense of where that's coming in. Also, if we're looking at ML22 under Gilwan, it's talking about saving £100,000. There's a lot of description about what happens at Gilwan, but there's no explanation of where that £100,000 saving is going to come from. So again, I think we need to have a little bit more on that. And then, sorry to have such a long list, and I can come back to this. If I'm looking at RES 24, which is the reduction or repurposing of MCC assets, we're looking at saving £215,000 in this year and equivalent sums in future years. Part of that is talking about disposing of Tudor Street as an asset that is no longer being used. Obviously, that is now situation on Tudor Street has changed. So I would just wonder whether we're updating the proposal on that. It also includes places like Drybridge House, which is the home of Bridges Community Centre, and Melville in Monmouth, and Melville Theatre in Abergavenny. It's put those down as priority 2. I just wondered what consultation had been taken with the charities that are actually using those centres and with users of those centres, because to talk about disposing of Drybridge House, which is the Bridges Community Centre in Monmouth, which is an incredibly well-used and valuable resource, and then suggesting that some of the activities might be transferred to the Market Hall, the old market in Monmouth, which actually also appears as an asset that is to be disposed of by the council. So actually, you're trying to count that twice and say you're going to shift one to the other, but actually talking about getting rid of both of them. So there's a lack of coherence, I think, in some of those proposals, which is really of concern, and particularly the one about Drybridge House, I think. So sorry, I'll probably stop there. I've got a few other things, but I know other people are going to come in on some of the ones that I've also got flagged up, so I'll leave it for that.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. Councillor Garrick.
Thank you very
Would you like
much.
to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm
Your
going to
screen has slightly dropped. As beautiful as the top of your hair is. Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you.
Okay, so I think going point, I'm just going to skip to your second point, which is your query on what is the financial income associated with 1% in council tax. So a 1% increase in council tax, according to our council base calculations, is in the region of £630,000. We're doing some further calculations to hone in on that, which I'm actually hoping to receive this week. But at the moment, our closest calculation is at £630,000. I believe the discrepancies in the table in Figure 1 and Figure 4 is around grants that we are eligible for. But I'm going to hand over to Jonathan, if that's okay, to ask him to clarify on that one.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think the initial question, Councillor Chandler, was around the figures in the actual covering report. I think quite simply it's the fact that the second figure is taking into account specific grants. So you'll be aware that we've published there a gross expenditure figure, and when specific grants are taken into account, that reduces that down to the 208 million. So yeah, an accountancy quirk that probably could have been better explained.
Okay, so taking the next two, which are the decarbonisation targets and their realisation, and then the focus on the income from the solar farm. I believe the solar farm piece is uncertain because it depends on energy market prices, which can fluctuate. However, I'm going to hand over. Is that one for you, those two?
It's Deborah Howell's area of work, councillor. I'm not sure whether Francis
Francis online now, so would that be more appropriate for you to take it, Francis?
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I came in on the very tail end of Councillor Chandler's sentence around that. So I wonder whether Councillor Chandler could just repeat that for me so I can respond, because I know it's around school transport, but I just missed a little bit of it.
Actually, we haven't reached the school transport one yet, Francis, but it's more on the decarbonisation side of things. It was about how robust is the 5% saving prediction on the energy awareness campaign, and had it been tested, and how does it relate to previous impacts? And then on the solar farm, it was again, it says it's uncertain, the 150,000, but what's the sort of the band of certainty in that, and have we got any more up-to-date figures since these budgets were put forward? So we've got a level of confidence. Are we talking between 120 and 160, or is it a bigger, very bigger possibility?
Okay, thank you. So with regards to the decarbonisation and the energy awareness campaign, what Ian and Deb have done is looked at other organisations who've been able to provide us some advice and support in terms of what we could achieve around things like switching off lights and making sure that we're utilising rooms and buildings effectively. So that's what the basis of that figure has been based upon. But obviously a lot of this is around the behaviour of officers and individuals in being conscious about what they're doing within those buildings. So it's going to be something that we will need to test, and we will need to ensure there's a good campaign and awareness campaign around it. What Deb and Ian are doing is going to be establishing a forum of relevant officers who are in buildings, building managers, people who operate buildings across the authority, so that we've got people together to be able to talk about it and monitor it. We'll also be doing a communications campaign for officers as well, so that we can make sure that we are raising awareness of what's achievable and how to do it across all of our buildings. Then with regards to the solar farm income, yes, that can be variable, but we have achieved above and beyond those figures historically. We're trying to be sensible at setting a level of income, additional solar farm income that we can put in there. So it is a prudent level rather than something that we are significantly concerned about. Thank you.
Thanks, Garrick. Are you ready? Yep. Thank you.
So I think the next piece was on the capital investment on pool covers. Ian, did you want to come in for this? This is in One Life's budget, isn't it?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks, Councillor. I think it is, whilst it is in One Life budget, obviously it's headed up by Ian and Deb, the pool cover and the amount of money that we recoup over putting the pool covers on. We know obviously, water and the heating from the pools is absolutely astronomical at the moment. Our budget has gone up considerably, and in this budget you will see an uplift of a considerable amount. 75% of the Mon Life budget for the 4 swimming pools is for energy increases. So it's not just keeping the water warm overnight, but actually what the pool cover does is it means we can drop the overall temperature of the building, because you're probably aware, if you've gone swimming and you come out, you can feel quite cold. But if the water, it just means the whole infrastructure of the pool is easier to manage if we do have a pool cover. We did have pool covers previously, about 10 to 12 years ago, but through various reasons they were taken out. But obviously putting them back in now is definitely the right thing to do. I can get the figures from Ian Hockham on the cost of how quickly they'll pay back, but I wouldn't think it would be very long with the considerable amount our budgets have had to be increased through the energy to just to give members an inkling of what it takes us almost a day of putting the heating on to move the temperature up 2 or 3 degrees in a pool. It's a huge drain on a resource that clearly you have to do backwashes regularly, which means dumping some water and then putting fresh water in, which means that needs to be reheated. So it's a constant continuous system of keeping our water clean for the hygiene levels that we need to through environmental health. So it is a welcome investment and one that you know, I've got no hesitancy that it's the right thing to be doing at this stage, and we can come back to committee with the figures on the payback for that investment if that's okay with you.
If I comment, yeah, I think that would be fine, Ian. I mean, that's probably actually the pool covers I've got least concern about. I suppose my point was a bit more general, maybe for Jonathan, about just are we looking at any particular benchmarks for return on investment for actually how we're transferring revenue expenditure into capital investments? And it's, you know, obviously it's budget shifting, but there is a long-term gain, which is good. But it's just having maybe a little bit more clarity on that sort of ROI figure. But thank you, Ian.
Okay, so I think the piece on the walking routes, I think you answered it yourself, and it was more of a comment on the difficulty in finding the capital investment piece on that, if that's okay with you, Councillor Chandler. Then the next piece on raising the discretionary transport in the anticipation of the impacts on car use. Francis, I think that's coming back to you. So the question is essentially, we're talking about the piece where we're raising the cost of discretionary transport. Have we considered the impacts both on car use and on service uptake?
I guess it will depend upon whether the families decide not to utilise the discretionary concessionary fares and pay the additional charge in order to provide transport for their children. The consequence will be whether they are able to walk to school or use other modes of transport, or whether the family determine that the best route would be to use a car. I would suspect that whilst there is an increase in the cost, that is still cheaper than actually driving the children to school. So I would hope that they would be happy to pay the increased fee for the concessionary charge. It is in line with what the public bus network charges as well. So the public bus charges is similar. So we have tried to set it at a sensible level.
Thanks. So the next question was around the setting of some costs which you perceive to be transferring of the cost to primary schools rather than a budget saving in one life. Ian, did you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, it's I suppose it is through the lens you look at this one. Obviously, there's no profit being made here. It's cost recovery for a service that, you know, is very valuable. Other schools do go outside of Monmouthshire and pay for courses and things to happen at a huge cost. So I think to introduce a small cost for the service that they get, I know that the heads are very appreciative of the great work that goes on inside the schools with this service. So you may say it's moving money around, but I think it's introducing a true cost for a service that's very valued, and obviously officers are paid through the council budget to deliver that service.
Okay. And then you had a question on ML22, which is the Gilwern saving, and the request is around not seeing clearly within the mandate where the saving is being made there. So again, is that you again, Ian, in terms of area for officers? Sorry, this is a bit outside of my portfolio. Did you want to come in, Sarah? Sorry.
Yeah,
Birch wanted to come in. Sorry.
If I may come in there, yeah, we've started a review of the Gilwern outdoor education service in the context of the new education curriculum, and the appetite of schools to go back to the kind of residential experience which has been so popular, and we know that that's important to many families, and how we can keep that affordable for families in the current context, but also how that site and that service can contribute to cost avoidance elsewhere. So if I can give as an example, it's being used for providing education to a couple of young people who would otherwise be out of school, and perhaps we might needing to provide a more expensive service. So I think at the moment the reason it is probably non-specific is because all options are still on the table, and it's a process of exploration and working together between the services. Again, how can we make the best use of that resource that we have there? It's a fantastic resource, it's a fantastic place, fantastic staff team, and we need to make sure that we absolutely make the most of it. And I think that probably relates to the lack of clarity that Councillor Chandler picks up in regard to the use of community buildings. The council has a large number of buildings across the county, some of which are being used in different ways to how they were being used pre-pandemic, many of which are not particularly energy efficient, and where we have a multiplicity of relationships with community organisations. There's a need to rationalise our use of buildings, both short and long term. But I can commit that before any disposals are made, there would be a full options appraisal, and it would come back to this committee. If that's okay to commit that, Rachel?
If that's your wish, yeah. I think it's...
Sorry, could I just come in there, sort of, because I think clearly, yeah, any individual disposal, we would want a full options appraisal. It would come back to this committee or another committee. That's part of the rules of the council. Yeah. I suppose what I'm concerned about is that we're putting into a budget proposal specific savings in relation to disposals of those assets. And, you know, with Gilwan, also specific savings in terms of savings at Gilwan. Those are figures that we're signing off, or you're hoping that we'll sign off at council on the 2nd of March. I would feel very uncomfortable at signing off those figures about disposals of those assets when that appraisal hasn't happened. And with a very uncertain outcome of that. So that's my concern, is the fact that it's not... Is you're prejudging some of those decisions by putting them into the budget proposal now. You're prejudging the disposal of Tudor Street, you're prejudging the disposal of Drybridge House and Melville Theatre and things like that. So I'm very uncomfortable about those being in there. No matter what process you might go through in the future, we're talking about a vote on the budget on the 2nd of March.
So I think I was actually going to be bringing in Peter Davis on this one as well, and obviously proper process will be followed. And again, there's anticipated savings in there and their potential for reduced costs. So if I can bring Peter in on this one to give you a fuller explanation, I think that would be really useful at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Garrick. Thank you, Councillor Chandler, Chair. Yeah, not wanting to, I guess, regurgitate or repeat Councillor Birch's input, and to the point that Councillor Garrick's just touched on. But it, you know, the mandate talks to 21 specific assets that have been identified with an important word, potential, for the potential opportunity to either lead to increased income or reduced cost, or the potential for disposal as part of an exercise of rationalisation of the council's estate. Clearly and importantly, and to Councillor Chandler's point, and for each of those, we will need to go through a proper and robust process. You know, that is work that we're looking to progress, you know, at relative speed, but appropriately and with proper process wrapped around it, in order to look to achieve the level of mandate savings that have been positioned within the budget. Clearly, the saving figure is not predicated on all of those 21, you know, being brought forward and delivered. We've taken a measured assessment of the levels of risk depending on the level of use of those buildings, the potential to be able to rationalise in some form, and for some of those buildings that are currently occupied, they are coming to the end of their respective lease terms, which in any event offers an opportunity to be able to look to review and, as necessary, renegotiate leases, etc. So, as I said, let's not fall necessarily into the trap that for each one of these that it necessarily falls into an asset that is going to be closed or disposed of. As I said, it's exploring the actual live opportunities that are in front of us to either reduce cost, increase income, or where applicable and relevant, and it has that potential for disposal.
Thank you, Peter. Ian, did you want to come back in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to get clarity on what Peter just said, because if I'm looking at RES 24 and the table that is there, it is projecting the savings for this year, the £215,000 savings that are in the budget, is about is include 4 of the 6 priority 1 properties, and that includes Tudor Street, but it also includes Mountain House, Seven View, and the agricultural cottages. Now, clearly, some of those probably are quite likely to happen, but I think some of those are still very much subject to reviews. And the same with the savings that are projected for 24-25. That does include a number of places, and that includes a number of assets that would certainly be subject to review. So that's what I meant about prejudging. It's not as if there's a
Sorry. So I think we're in violent agreement here, whether you feel that to be the case or not. But obviously, the sizing of the potential saving and in the respective years is predicated on the assets that are in our immediate line of sight. As they've been sort of ranked accordingly, and the ones that you've referred to, they are not all givens for the reasons that you've just outlined. And there are processes that need to be worked through. But it's why Nick Keys, in his role, has looked, and working with me to extend his radar, his casting his net as widely in the first instance as possible to look at where there are assets that potentially offer some opportunity. And clearly, as things, if we rightly come to conclusions that certain assets, are not ripe for rationalisation, then clearly we will look further and beyond. That's part of the process, really, and which is why that the 21 assets that have been initially and immediately identified, that work extends over a 2-year period, and clearly we will monitor and update that as needed. And I guess within the context of the budget that Rachel's talked to, the challenges that we're facing. Clearly, the asset management strategy and plan, which we'll be looking to develop and bring through off the back of the community corporate plan being approved, there will be an important facet within that in terms of making sure that our estate is fit for purpose, but it is also and is running optimally and at lowest cost, but importantly meeting the needs of our communities at the same time. It's striking that appropriate balance. So this is not just a fire sale of assets. Absolutely far from it.
Thank you, Peter. Are we happy to move on to other councillors' questions now? What's the time? 5:15. Okay, if I can take Councillor Brown's questions and then I'll call a break. Is that okay? Okay, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor Chandler, for your questions, and thank you, Councillor Garrick and officers there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got 2 or 3 questions, and I think one of them centres around Gwent Music, because I've had a resident who's in my area who said that they're really sad and upset to read that the council will be withdrawing the Gwent Music subsidy. And I appreciate that other councils have done done this, but I have been given a practical example of how this resident's son, who was aged 9 in 2019, a Gwent music tutor went to his primary school in Shire Newton in September to give the class the opportunity to try out some brass and wind instruments. He was able to get a note or two out of the saxophone and expressed an interest in learning to play. We were very lucky to be able to borrow a saxophone that belongs to Gwent Music, and he started lessons in school. And this resident went on to explain how during lockdown it was so important to continue with lessons, and now this pupil has achieved grade 6 in that particular musical instrument. And I've even been sent links on videos on what an amazing talent this child has got. So I am concerned about this 100k cut in the subsidy. In fact, it says, I've looked at the page, I think it's 71, and it goes into, there's about 500 pages, and it goes into details about this, and it says that the hardship fund, obviously lessons are quite expensive, and so are musical instruments, will be £9,000. Now, I don't think for low-income families, and I don't think £9,000 as a hardship fund is a particularly great amount to cover the whole of Monmouthshire for low-income families who can't afford lessons or can't afford musical instruments. So wondered if the Cabinet member could comment on that particular aspect, because I have indicated to the resident concerned that I would raise it. I think the second question that I've got is about school transport, because we did go through a policy that was basically the fact that the mileage in terms of infant children and also for secondary children is more than the statutory minimum. Now, I'm concerned about the levels of mileage going down, and I wanted a reassurance that where there is a discretionary element to this, which is basically about whether it's a safe route to school, and I wanted some reassurance that the safe route to school would still be considered, and I am concerned about these mileage levels going down. And I think with regard to the concessionary side of this, I believe that the amount is, if you pay for a concessionary bus place, I believe it's something like, I can't remember from memory, it's either £420 or £440 per year currently. Now, if you've got 2 children who need to pay for a concessionary place, that's about £880 for a family. Now, they're going to start using their car because those costs are too much. So it'll increase, pollution and so forth, and traffic congestion and everything else. So I'd like to know exactly what level is being proposed for this increase in concessionary travel, and whether there's any allowance for the number of children involved. But basically, I am obviously concerned about the school transport issue as well. And coming back to, I'm a little bit like Councillor Chandler in the sense that I'm a bit of a detailed person who looks at these particular issues. And I think the issue with regard to the council assets, which I think is on, I'll just look at it through here. I think there's a long page of about 21 assets. It's about 500 and something in this budget 520 or 25 or something of that level, and it goes into 21 different assets. And I appreciate that what Councillor Chandler has said about the, are these all part of the 11.4 million with regard to savings reductions? Because obviously some of them will take some time to look at, and with regard to Sevenview Care Home, I would very much like to see that go to affordable housing, because it's in a perfect location for that sort of thing. And then the other question I've got is really so basically Gwent School transport, and the third one is assets. And the fourth question is about opening hours, because basically we're not clear about the reduction in the opening hours for libraries and leisure centres and so forth, and how this will impact different users. For example, I know that we've got a high elderly population who perhaps prefer to access leisure services during the daytimes and don't like driving out at night. So will this impact one group more than another? And I think there's a lot of questions with regard to this budget that we haven't got more detailed analysis of what's being proposed. Now, there would be some more detailed analysis that we haven't actually got, because how can you actually specify what the amount of savings is unless you know roughly how you're going to reduce these opening hours? The opening hours also for places like libraries has an impact on warm spaces for people during winter months, and obviously everybody is concerned about the cost of living with regard to energy bills and so forth. So, some people who are perhaps in bed and breakfast accommodation because of affordable housing and homeless needs, they need possibly to also access these warm spaces as well. And, I think we're trying to look at, some of the low-income families and the impact on them, but also those who are just managing. So there's about 3 or 4 different issues there, but I hope it's helpful, and I'm not duplicating things, because this is sort of more drumming down into what the practical impact of these proposed measures will be and how they will be consulted upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Garrett, will you be answering these, or would you like some officers to come in here?
I'll be bringing in a combination of officers and cabinet members according to the portfolios. So in terms of Gwent Music, our portfolio holder for that area isn't in, but I would like to bring Nikki in as the officer on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. With Gwent Music, obviously it's a very, very hard decision that we've made, and we've maintained the subsidy for a number of years when other local authorities have pulled out. In terms of, if I just jump to the hardship fund, I think, which is one of the questions around the £9,000, that fund has been in place for a number of years, and that fund has actually been underspent. So we have been rolling over some of that money into the next year to increase that fund. Obviously, we will work with Gwent Music to ensure that the fund is at the correct level, and we will work with them to ensure that all the families that can access that are accessing that. So that's one of the priorities for us. In terms of the other support that we provide towards Gwent Music, we do actually provide a subsidy which goes to schools, goes to Gwent Music, but is from the school's budget, which represents supporting whole class provision, which I believe is probably one of what your resident was asking about for her son. We are looking to try and maintain that so that schools will still have access to those whole class provisions and be able to try out instruments to see whether they want to continue with music lessons. one of the decisions we need to make it with Gwent Music is whether or not the music lessons will increase. Again, we don't want to pass that burden on to families, but we will be working very closely with them to ensure that we can provide the best support and continue with that to ensure that as much isn't passed on to parents as possible.
Thank you. Just wanted to know where the whole class provision was, because the budget's being reduced from 120 to 20,000. Is that where the 20,000 is?
At the moment, there's a budget of 40,000 for whole class provision, which is across, or actually 44,000, which is across all schools. So obviously that will form part of the reduction, but we're going to be working with Gwent Music to see what they can still provide in whole class provision for schools. Schools request that, and also be working with schools to see whether they want to top that up back up to the 44,000 so that they continue with whole class provision.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. Councillor Garrick, do you want to come back in on with regards to school transport? Oh, you're on mute.
Apologies, grappling with the mute button there as well, sorry. Again, this one is outside of my portfolio. Francis, can I ask you to come in on this one, please?
So breaking down the various questions there from Councillor Brown, with regards to the safe routes to school, yes, that is still a requirement to undertake the assessment with regards to the safe routes to school and ensuring there is a safe route to school when the consideration of the application comes in from a family and from a pupil. So that will remain, there's no change there. With regards to the concessionary charge, at present, it is £440 for the whole academic year. The proposal set out within the budget mandate is to increase that proposed charge from £440 to £550 for a resident of Monmouthshire County Council, and increase it to, let me just double check the figures, £650 for a non-Monmouthshire resident. With regards then to the limits and the mileage limits, just to be clear, this isn't something that will be implemented in this year. There would need to be a full public consultation and engagement exercise. So the proposed policy would come back as a separate report and document to commence the start of the consultation process. That consultation process would then open, and then the revised policy would be implemented for an October 2023 implementation date in terms of the policy, which means that the impact on the families and the children will be for the following academic year. There's a process that we have to go through for that. So the proposal that's being considered here would be to revert back to the statutory limits set by Welsh Government. We're currently more favourable for both primary and secondary school children at present, and that would revert then from 1.5 miles for primary to 2 miles, and for secondary pupils from 2 miles to 3 miles. So that's the proposals in terms of the changes. Our calculations based on current pupils is that that would affect around 127 learners would then not be eligible for free transport at that point in time. And one of the key things that we do want to do is to improve the routes for children to be able to access school in terms of active travel routes, walking routes, cycle routes and scooting routes. So hopefully that just provides a little bit of clarity there, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, could I just ask, is the mileage, is the safe route independent from the mileage? So it doesn't matter what the mileage is, but whether it's a safe route, or are they considered together? Thank you.
It will depend, Councillor Brown, on whether they are entitled to that transport. So if a pupil was living 5 miles, then obviously they'd be entitled to that transport, and we wouldn't then need to undertake an assessment on the safe routes to school if that pupil was beyond that criteria. But it is important where there are pupils that are within that mileage. So perhaps there's a pupil as a half a mile or less from the school, we would undertake an assessment of the safe routes to school first. And there are within the budget mandate some routes that we think that could be improved and improve accessibility of pavements. So sometimes there isn't a pavement, and if we had a small stretch of pavement in place, then those pupils would be able to get to school without requiring free home to school transport. So those things are dependent upon the location of the family and the location of the school. They all need to be considered individually.
Yeah, I think it was possibly said the wrong way round. I think it's currently 2 miles for infants, reduced to 1.5 miles, and for secondary it's 3 miles reduced to 2 miles, which I think you said the other way round, so I was just clarifying that. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Councillor Garrett, did you want to come back in there then?
If it's okay, could we move on to the council assets at that point?
Yeah, that's lovely.
So in terms of those 21 assets, so essentially the priority 2s and the priority 3s, they're there as estimates. So they're included for information, not as intentions. So you'd need to do more work before you could include those properties into the mid-term financial plan going forward into further years. So essentially the answer is no, we're not looking at disposing 21 properties at all. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think I was asking about Seven View Care Home and affordable housing as well. Thank you.
So I think that's early stage in proposals. I don't believe we firmed up any particular notions on that. I don't know, Sarah, you are our housing czar at this point. Would you like to come in?
Yes. To be honest with you, what are we going to do with Seven View Care Home when the Crick Road Care Home opens? Is an open question, and one that I will be discussing with cabinet colleagues and with officers. I don't know whether the care home capacity is needed in the longer term, whether it is possible to bring it forward for affordable housing, or whether there may be other interim uses. I think it's an open question at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And I think lastly was around opening hours being reduced.
I think I have Angela would like to come in on the library pieces, and I think Sarah was going to come in on the leisure pieces as well.
Okay, really good question, Councillor Brown, about opening hours of our hubs, and we are actually engaging with the staff at the moment in our community hubs, and at this stage we're really optimistic that although we will be reducing staffing levels, we will actually be able to maintain the opening hours. For example, we might be opening with 2 staff, so as Councillor Garrick said earlier, it might mean a slightly longer wait on the telephone lines when people call in. And so there might be a bit of a longer wait, but it means that we can keep these vital services open. And obviously we know that many people value the face-to-face access that our hubs and libraries provide. And they also provide really valuable social contact and opportunity for so many of our residents. So hopefully that's a bit of good news, really. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call a short 5-minute break.
Sorry, could I just ask about the leisure centres, because we didn't get an answer on opening hours for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to
that would be Sarah.
Yeah.
Councillor Birch, are you able to come in here?
Certainly, yes. As with other services, we're reviewing the opening hours of the leisure centres and the on-live sites. Currently planning to reduce the opening hours during the summer. People use leisure centres differently around the year. So at this time of year, you know, if you want to go for exercise in the evening, then it's either, you know, YouTube videos or exercise bike at home, or to go and use the leisure centre. And people do use the leisure centres more in the winter. During the summer, they are used less. So I think the proposal is to reduce the opening hours at times when we know the leisure centres are very seldom used. I know there are some people who are uncomfortable with that, who enjoy a late night swim. I do myself, but unfortunately keeping the leisure centre open for what is sometimes fewer than 10 people at the last hour of the day, unfortunately, I think is a luxury we can no longer afford.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Birch. Okay, so we'll go to a 5-minute break, and we can all come back then refreshed. Okay, thank you.
Chair. I think you're mute. Apparently one of my sons has fallen over coming up from school. My eldest son is coming down, going down to check in, but there's a small chance I might get a call about it. I'm very sorry.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. He's a priority. If you need to go, I'm sure Pete and the team will be able to take over for questioning. I hope he's okay.
Thanks. I think it will be okay. Just wanted to make sure in case I did get disturbed or anything.
Of course, that's fine. Okay. Just waiting for Hazel to reappear and then we can get started.
Okay, Chair, we're back online.
Lovely, thank you ever so much. So I'll move to the next councillors wanting to speak. I've got Councillor Bryn, Councillor McConnell, Councillor Lucas. I understand Councillor Davis wants to come back in, and then Councillor Strong. Can we ensure that we don't repeat questions, because obviously it's coming up to 4 o'clock now. So yes, Councillor Bryn.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask, with school traffic management improvements, are we confident the funding has been enough funding has been allocated for this, as it's an area of highlighted concern, particularly as the cuts in the school transport service budget will result in an increased number of children finding their own way to school? And are we hoping that they'll be, encouraged to walk, scoot, or cycle independently? And how will we be monitoring the effect of those changes? And also, can I also request a little bit more information on the Newport Retail Park and Castlegate Business Park? I wanted to know if the figures shown are a true reflection of the costs incurred, including officers' time, etc., and what the future plans are for these sites, and how they sit with the ambitions of the corporate plan, where the aim is to reduce the carbon output caused by commuting out of county, considering that the Newport site isn't in county. We're proposing increasing our parking fees across county, but then funding a site across border with free car parking, which feels like a little bit of a conflict of interest. And one more thing, could you tell me, are car parks, even with this price increase, still being subsidised? And if the funding range is ring-fenced for the upkeep? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryn.
So I think in terms of the car parking and the school transport, those are both under Catherine's portfolio, and Francis is the officer there. Would it be okay to bring in Francis for that one?
Of course.
Thank you.
So with regards to school traffic management, we're hoping that that will be sufficient to be able to make some of those improvements that we'd like to see within the school environment. I'm sure the more money we could have, we could do lots with, but within the constraints that we've got, that's a good starter for 10 in terms of being able to target some of those things that we'd like to do within schools to improve that traffic management. Yes, we will monitor that. It'll be very difficult for us to monitor individually in terms of each school setting, and we will be reliant upon feedback from yourselves, from the schools, in terms of if there are any issues that are presenting at schools, if there's increased sort of issues with regards to any near misses or anything like that. So any feedback loops that we can encourage for that to be fed back into us, that's really welcomed. The other aspect then around car parks, yes, one of the requirements with regards to the income associated with car parks is that it is reinvested back into the infrastructure. So that is an important point in terms of the management and maintenance of the car parks and the car park surfaces. And obviously they are quite expensive to maintain. So yes, they do get reinvested back into the whole portfolio. Was there anything I missed there, Councillor Brem?
Yeah, so are they still being subsidised, or are they now self-funding our own car parks?
We do receive an income associated with the car parks, so they wouldn't be in a subsidised position in that sense. We do receive a considerable income from car parks, which goes back into the highways management service.
Okay. And can you one way of monitoring would be to know if there's an increase in, I mean, you do monitor how many children are walking, cycling and driving to school. So one way of monitoring was to see if there is actually an increase of children driving, or if there's an increase of children walking and cycling after the implementation of the school bus transport cuts, if you know what I mean. Could you also tell me? Can you tell me when you look at the distances, is it as the crow flies, or is it actual distance walked?
Generally as the crow flies, but we also try to take into account, particularly in a rural authority, that isn't necessarily very accurate because that might not be the actual route that the road or the pavement follows. So we do try to be really sensible about that. And sometimes when parents appeal, they will say that's not actually, you know, the route to the school, and we need to consider all options. So yeah, that is something that we take into account rather than a blanket radius as the crow flies.
Thank you. And who's going to respond to the question around Castlegate and Newport Retail Park?
Okay, so that is my portfolio. So essentially, those numbers absolutely should be correct and accurate. They're the numbers that have been provided by the officers, and we do expect all of those financial details to be correct. In terms of Castlegate and it being out of county in part and having free parking, I think we're all aware that Castlegate has been a contentious.
Sorry, do you mean Newport? Castlegate is the one that's in county.
I do.
It's okay. That's all right.
It's Castlegate is literally at the bottom of my ward as well.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, everybody.
It's okay. That's all right. It's the Newport one that's out of county. Yeah.
Yes. So Newport Retail Park. I think we're all aware it's been contentious and sort of as an investment and it's raised a lot of questions. It's not an investment that we as an administration chose to make. And I think we are very clear that both Castlegate and Newport Leisure Park at this point in time are not given the returns that we would want them to give as a council. However, looking at the economic situation as well, it's not entirely prudent to consider divesting of them either, which means we are in the position where we do have an out-of-county investment, which has some elements of risk of it. We're aware that Cineworld does have financial difficulties at the moment. We have lost Inflate as a tenant there, as well as they have now closed their doors as well. So it is somewhat of a sort of standout difference in where we are, but it is at this point in time part of the council assets. So it's difficult to do much with that in terms of where we are financially and what we could do in terms of prudence ongoing forward with that. Peter, as Chief Finance, would you have any more comments on that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Garrick. Yeah, I think it's just to reaffirm the point made to Councillor Bryn's question. Figures are accurate to the point of drafting. Clearly, the position evolves and changes on a regular basis, and clearly, through officers and advisors, we make sure that we keep on top of all of that. Together with the level of associated risk. Obviously, that is then reported up and through investment committee, who get regular performance updates on the portfolio, and that to Councillor Garrick's point, we continually take an assessment, I guess, in terms of whether the benchmark returns are being met. And if not, to determine through an option the continual assessment of options appraisal as to whether the asset is retained or otherwise. And Councillor Garrick's right to point out that current economic climate is not conducive, certainly, to disposal at this point. I think it's fair to say, certainly with Castlegate, it's been very resilient all the way through the pandemic in terms of its occupancy. And yes, we have lost Mytel as an anchor tenant. But in its place, we've expanded significantly the footprint of other tenants. That's a really good news story, and there's a lot of other interest as well in terms of the remaining occupancy to be let. NLP is a completely different story. We're accepting and acknowledging the point. It's outside the county, but it's very much on the periphery. And if you look at the habits, I guess, of a Monmouthshire population, particularly in the south of the county, they look to make heavy use of it in that regard. But it's a little bit more volatile, I guess, just given the nature coming out of the pandemic and the tendencies that are positioned there. But saying all of that, and despite the levels of commercial risks that you'll naturally carry around investments such as these, the interest in NLP remains very strong. So as an investment asset, whether for retention or any future potential sale, that's in a good place.
Thank you, Peter. Next, I've got Councillor McConnell. Thank you, Councillor Bryn, for your question. Sorry.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Quite a few of the issues I was going to question about have been covered, so I won't hold up the committee any longer than I have to. One of two. So my various members in my ward are very excised about the raise in the cost of the green waste collection service, and in particular, they're saying it's the having to pay for it in one go, which is difficult. So my question really, well, two things. One is I'm slightly concerned that should the use of this fall away, that we assume that's a lack of demand rather than because of the price. But the other thing is, and this would apply to school transport as well, I think, what scope is there for arranging things that we charge, I think a fair price for? What is the scope for spreading the cost over the year or over the term, rather than having it in lump sums? Because that's the bit that hurts, I think, is having to pay for it in one go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garrick, I'm mindful that the question around garden waste isn't in your portfolio. Would you like Carl to come in for that one for you?
Great, please.
Lovely.
Thanks,
Carl, I know we discussed this at some length in place, but if you could just provide a response, I'd be very grateful.
Yeah, happy to respond. The garden waste scheme went live last week. We've had just over 3,000 applicants coming through so far. We've hit a few issues today with the system, but we're comfortable that we're on target for this year. We've looked at whether we can do a direct debit system or whether we can do 3 easy payments, those type of payments to make it easier for the residents. At the moment, the Civica portal and the contract don't speak together in the background. So that's one of the issues that we're working through this year. Hopefully next year we'll have a direct debit or easy payment mechanism for the costs. We won't know until the end of February how much uptake we've had on the scheme. It'll probably be the beginning of March before everyone registers, and then I'm happy to bring them figures back to Place Scrutiny to talk through what we've learned from this process.
Lovely, thank you, Carl. And school transport, staggering payments. Would you like to come in there, Francis?
Yes, no problem. We already offer the spreading of the payments for school transport, so that will continue. That is something we are able to do, the school transport service, with regards to via instalment. So that's an option for families.
Lovely, thank you for that. Are you happy, Councillor McConnell?
Thank you.
Thanks. Next is Councillor Jane Lucas.
Afternoon all, thank you very much. Some of these well, points. There might be points rather than questions on some of it. I am just fascinated by how, what, and why. So, for example, we refer to reducing energy costs. Can we not just turn off some lights in buildings and other places and street lights in unnecessary areas after a certain time? That could save a lot. I can give you a couple of examples without too much hassle. Osbaston School, the lights are on in the yards all the way through the footpaths and stay on all night. There is no children there at night. Why are the lights on? Apart from the cost, there's the environmental damage as well, reference to bats in particular. Then we talk about there's litter picking, and there's a reference earlier on about how we have a litter picker in towns. Well, Monmouth Town Council actually pay for our litter picker. The gentleman's name is Lee, I believe. Know him quite well, and certainly by sight, and I see him all around. And we've had great debates in Monmouth Town Council as to how and what he does. And there's a great fee of, I believe, £24,000 to pay for it from the town council. Closure of bridges. Wow, that is one heck of a statement of possibility. I have a question. If the proposed closure of bridges, or possible proposed closure of bridges, I should say, how would that be worked? How would it be implemented? Bearing in mind it's such an importance of hub for our town in Monmouth. I mean, it's just I'm staggered to even contemplate that one, and I'd like to know a lot more, please. Cattle market, the increasing of car parking fees and business rates, I one assumes as well. If we increase our business rates and we increase our parking charges, we are killing our town even more than we already are. And we need free car parking, or at least not increase it. And when we're talking about the cattle market, in particular in Monmouth, on a Friday, half of that market car park is closed for market. Well, there's only 2 stallholders there. Can we not move those 2 stallholders, or 3 on occasions, up to the square in Agincourt Square, and make the market there much more active and vibrant and inclusive, and much more taking people up to the top of our town? So, and then also that would therefore increase the ability to have more people into Monmouth, because half that car park's closed off, and yet we have a full car park. Why? And it's 2 lots of stallholders. Seems ludicrous to me. The other point there about the market hall, selling off, a possible selling off, I believe Councillor Chandler Porter about the bridges and then also the market hall. If the market hall is also possibly up for selling off, then why are we spending so much time officer time, I should say, trying to get the levelling up fund? Just a question. And then if we're reducing hours on opening for libraries and hubs and leisure centres, etc., which, okay, I understand, are we having staffing redundancies? And if so, how's that being operated, please? And one more question. £300,000 of learning disabilities being cut. Out of all the cuts, they are by far, probably in my eyes anyway, the ones that need the support the most. Why are we cutting them? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Where do you want to go first, Councillor Garrick? Litter picks, shall we go to Carl?
Yeah, I'm happy to take those questions. I'm street lighting, so...
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Carl.
As explained to Councillor Davis, the repurposing of the cleansing is not to reduce any cleansing. It won't impact the input from the town teams, and we're very grateful to Monmouthshire Town Council for contributing towards the costs of Lee and the other services that we provide in the town. So it's not to impact on Lee. Lee will still be providing our service. All we will do is have the sweeper more available more of the time, and we can get a lot more work done with a mechanical sweeper than we can doing everything by hand. So hopefully we will see an improvement across the board by having the mechanical sweeper out more. The street lights across the county have been reduced over many years. We've also gone to LED lighting, which has reduced our costs and the energy usage on the lighting. Many of the lights are on a circuit, so to come out and shut lights down, it would be done individually. We can't just close lights down from a central location for Osbaston footpath. So certainly I'm happy to contact the councillor outside of this meeting to discuss those lights, and where we can reduce that lighting in the evening, we certainly will. We will do it as a more of a piecemeal approach, individual lights, work with councillors, work with residents to close lights down where we can. What we can't do is put a cost against that in a budget at the moment, because we don't know how many we can switch off.
Thank you, Carl.
Sorry, may I? The lights I was referring to in Osbaston were within the school grounds. It's within the school grounds. So there's no kids there, and there's lights on within the school grounds every night.
My understanding is the plan is to work with schools on reducing the lighting in schools, in school buildings, across all of our estate as well. We're working, with all of our contractors as well to reduce the lighting on sites where we're working with them as well. So I think probably we need to go to the school to address that specific one, but where we can, we will work with the school and take those lights down if possible.
Thank you, Carl. Next was car parking charges. Who would like, because I can't see anyone from Francis, would that be you, or do you want to come? Yeah, Francis.
Just following on from the query there about the energy costs, that is part of the corporate energy policy that we'll be looking to introduce, and working with head teachers in particular around the school grounds and school settings where we need to install things like light controls, or where things are being identified that they're switched on and aren't being turned off of the evening. So that is part of that particular budget mandate. With regards to the car parking charges and business rates, obviously business rates isn't something that we are in control of and able to set as a local authority level. Car parking charges, I know the Cabinet have made a commitment, and the previous administration made a commitment to undertake a review of our car parking charges and the mechanism for charging across the whole of the authority. So that's something that will be commenced in the new financial year and be brought back into the place scrutiny environment to work through in terms of reviewing the whole of the car parking charging model. Did I miss something on car parking, Councillor Lucas?
Yes, on Councillor Mark. Sorry, Francis.
Oh yes, the two stall holders.
Yeah, there's a couple of stall holders, and they vary as to which ones. In half the car park in Cattle Market at the bottom of Blessium, and what happens is that car park is closed off. Half the car park is closed off every Friday, and sometimes on Saturdays as well, and there's no one there. And yet our car park, the rest of the car park's overflowing, and we haven't got enough room. And yet we want people to come to our town. Just seems ludicrous to me. Can we not move them up to the top of town, please?
I think that's something we can definitely work with the elected members in that area on as well, in terms of encouraging more market traders if they are interested in being part of the market. And we have discussed previously about looking at different locations for them, because not many people are visiting those couple of stalls as you've identified at the south of the town. So yes, I'm happy to pick up that conversation separately with the team.
Thank you, Francis. And then next was opening hours. By reducing opening hours, will there be staff redundancies? And what does that look like? And learning disability cuts. So who can I get to come in there?
I think on the learning disability cuts, sorry, I think Tyrone was wanting to come in on that one for us.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy to come on that. Thanks, Councillor Garrick and Councillor Dimmock. In answer to your question, Councillor Lucas, just so I've got my trail of thought right, you're talking about the 300,000 or so mandate that's been identified. Thank you. It was just so I'm not talking cross purposes.
No, great, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. In terms of the mandate, is one where we're looking at the high cost placements, those in expensive residential placements, around whether we can strengthen our negotiation around those, and also where we can look for alternatives rather than reliance on those high cost residential placements. It is a challenge with supply and demand when there's low supply, high demand, but nevertheless, we are looking at that moving forward as a strategy, or strengthening our strategy, I should say. Another one as well is looking at clients where they do meet the continuing healthcare triggers. And that's one of the major parts of that mandate service, making sure where those triggers are met early, that we do get into that negotiation with continuing healthcare, that they do take over the funding rather than it being a local authority funding requirement. And the earlier we can do it, the more advantage we can make those savings to the budget. Does that help to answer, Councillor?
Yes, I just concerned that it just seems robbing Peter pay Paul routine, and I just worry about the people that it will affect.
I can understand that. In terms of the people, if I take the biggest part of that saving can be from the continuing healthcare, because those care package are the highest ones for those people with learning disabilities. The client shouldn't really see any cause and effect. Is more where we get into those negotiations early. We've already got a panel set up, it's been set up for many years, where the local authority representatives and health representatives do have that conversation around funding streams, for which the client shouldn't be a pig in the middle, if you like, or words of that effect. They should be, the care should be unaffected, and is one where is a matter about the best organisation to fund. I appreciate it all comes out of the public purse, but forgive me, this is one where we are looking at Monmouthshire County Council's budget and just making sure we have got that continuing healthcare criteria. It is quite clear around what is to be funded by the local authority as opposed to that funded by health, and we're just making sure that we do follow that as closely as possible.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyrone, and thank you, Councillor Lucas. Councillor Davis.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Just I was the one point about the possible closure of bridges and how that could possibly be implemented.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Who would?
So that's my portfolio. So with bridges, we're not looking to dispose of it, but we are looking at the income potential on that. The lease is due for renewal, and so we would be looking to put it on more of a commercial footing. Peter, would you want to come in with any more information on that one?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Garrick. I think it's just to simply highlight that as we're getting towards lease renewal, Bridges have approached us. They're keen to explore options. I think they themselves recognise that in terms of the very good work that continues to be carried out through Bridges, which I think we're all familiar with. There are aspects of how the building is used, which probably falls more so into sort of commercial use. And I think it's recognised, and by them as well, that when we enter into the lease renewal, that we will need to renegotiate on that footing. So I think the mandate simply takes account of that being worked through, and obviously their interest in exploring those options. I don't know, Councillor Garrick, if you want me to go beyond that and just to cover off the point on Market Hall, or I can leave that to you to deal with.
You're in flow, go for it.
All right. So Market Hall, in a very similar, from a one and the same sort of perspective, the Market Hall, that is not again about disposal. That is again, and almost to echo my earlier point when Councillor Chandler was raising questions around this. This is not just purely, about assets for disposal. It's equally about assets and where they got income generation potential, and Market Hall is one of those. And in terms of, regardless of LUF, actually, and to the point, there are opportunities to make better use of that building to secure tenants and to obviously generate income that we're not at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Two quick questions, if I may. The budget for basic salaries for councillors in the current financial year is £772,800. This is earmarked to increase to £818,000 for financial year 2023-2024, based, as I'm sure the Cabinet members are aware, on the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales's recommendations, thus creating a budget pressure of £45,000 for this authority. Does the Cabinet member agree with me that it would be wise for councillors to reject this proposed pay rise? And will she and her Cabinet colleagues lead by example and forego their own salary increases in the next financial year? And finally, if I may, Chair, turning to the cumulative financial impact of the draft budget, can I finally invite the Cabinet member to confirm, for the avoidance of any doubt, that with a council tax increase of close to 6%, with the proposed additional discretionary charges based on the modelling in the impact assessments shared with councillors, is it the case still that a single parent with 2 dependent children will be £784 worse off next year, whilst a household of 4, comprising 2 adults and 2 dependent children, will be close to £1,400 worse off next year? Can you confirm that to be the case, yes or no? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garrick.
So it's not up to me whether councillors choose to or choose not to forego or reject the recommended increase from the Independent Remuneration Panel. That would require a full council vote for it. So I'm not in a position to be able to say whether you should or not. That is a decision for full council rather than an individual Cabinet member. There's arguments that say that to get full representation throughout the community, it is essential that councillors are paid in a way that allows them to take an income. We have examples of councillors who have low incomes, and it is more important to be able to include those in the council. I think it's a bit of a misnomer and red herring to look at exactly what councillors earn. But if Councillor Davis would like to send a motion to council, full council, I'm sure that full council could discuss that within.
Well, I'm very pleased to report that I was one of only 2 councillors in Democratic Services to reject the proposed pay rise. So regrettably, the Democratic Services Committee thought otherwise. But I thought I'd invite the Cabinet member all the same to lead by example. But turning to the meat of my questioning, can she confirm the cumulative financial impacts based on the modelling shared in the impact assessments, that my reading is accurate, that a single parent with 2 dependent children will be close to £800 worse off next year, and a family of 4 with comprising of 2 adults and 2 dependent children will be close to £1,400 worse off? Is that accurate?
Is that what you have read in the appendix?
I'm inviting the Cabinet member to confirm that that is the cumulative financial impact based on her own officials' modelling. Can she take this opportunity to confirm to the residents of Monmouthshire that that is the case?
Would you be able to confirm that's what you have taken from the appendix on that?
I am quoting from the appendix, and I invite the member to confirm that my reading of that is accurate, that a single parent will be £800 worse off next year, and a family of 4, £1,400 worse off. Am I accurate in my reading of that financial modelling?
I'm afraid I don't have the paper to hand exactly at this point in time. I would have to confirm with you. I would hope that you are able to read the paper accurately.
Thank you. Chair, might I invite the Cabinet member to perhaps confirm in writing to this committee that my assessment and reading of the cumulative impact on a typical family is indeed accurate?
Okay, Thank you, Councillor Davis. I will add that to the action register. Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions. The first one, I just wanted to touch on continuing healthcare, and just because this was raised at one of the other meetings that we had, I'm not sure which one, we've had so many, and it was, I think I wanted sort of confirmation that staff would have the required training and support to be able to challenge and do the required assessments to get continuing healthcare assessments done, and actually to get proper funding from the NHS rather than from MCC funds. But I also note that, as far as I'm aware, that you can't have continuing healthcare with a direct payment. Is that correct? So that's question one. And so that will possibly be a deterrent for some people to actually go down the continuing healthcare route. I know that Welsh Government were consulting on that, but I'd quite like to find out if that's the case. I also want to ask a question about the workforce development proposals. I'm not quite clear on what the proposals might mean. Am I right in thinking that the proposal is to merge the team with a neighbouring authority, but the team to be hosted within Monmouthshire? I'd like some clarification on that. And I also note within the sort of impact of the proposals, it's quite a worry to think that some of the negative aspects of cutting back on training might be that people decide to go and work for other authorities. We've got we were told there were like 1,000 hours of unmet care needs. We've got a problem with recruitment and retention, and we really do need to beef up workforce development. And I'm hoping that with this Caduce budget, Social Care Wales will adequately fund what is needed within Monmouthshire. So I just want some clarification about what that actually means. I also want to just have some clarification about the sort of safety aspects of the CCTV scheme, and also community safety. Councillors will be aware that over the summer, the Caldicot councillors worked quite closely with the police commissioner. I know that Councillor Dimmock attended a meeting with us in raising issues around public safety, antisocial behaviour within Caldicot, and I'd like to see the CCTV function within our town actually made sort of fit for purpose, really. So I welcome some of the changes, but I also note that it's still a worry for people in our town. And lastly, I'm sorry, Chair, lastly, I just want to raise some of the changes with the grassroots scheme. It's a really well-liked and great service for a range of residents across, especially across the south of Sevenside. You know, we haven't got adequate public transport. If people want to go, and I know that grassroots doesn't actually go into Newport, but if people want to catch a bus into Newport, it's about an hour and a half, or it's 53 minutes. That's instead of getting in a car, and it would be 15 or 20 minutes. So I really value the grassroots service, and I think that rather than ditching it completely, we do look at remodelling, but make it as though it's accessible for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. Councillor Garrick, I suppose community healthcare, who have we got?
It would be Tyrone, I think.
Tyrone.
Thank you. Well, I can come in on the continuing healthcare questions that Councillor Strong asked. In terms of continuing healthcare, we've got a quality panel that's been in operation for many years between the local authority and health. The staff that attend on behalf of Monmouthshire County Council are well trained. Also, back under the previous administration, don't quote me, but I think is around financial year 2016, 2017, or it could be 2017, 2018. We came up with a savings proposal around continuing healthcare again. And part of that proposal was to set up a specific post within the team that was an expert in continuing healthcare. And the work that they do would morph from savings into one of cost avoidance. We've still got that post, and they do pass on their knowledge to either other staff or new recruits. So they are fully supported in the requirements of continuing healthcare, the triggers, and being in the right place to undergo those negotiations with health. I'm only speaking on behalf of the Chief Officer, but from what I can ascertain, the confidence is there that we have got that covered within the Directorate. Does that help to answer your question on continuing healthcare?
That's great. I mean, in a previous existence, I was the social worker actually assessing youngsters with a learning disability, so I know how difficult it is. I know what a challenge it is to work alongside health professionals and actually get good package of care. Are you aware of the direct payments issue?
Yes, I am. I might be a little bit of my comfort zone on this, but my understanding of direct payments is not that continuing healthcare can't take over the funding, is more they can't pay for the direct payment. So if it's been agreed, is one where the local authority would still have to agree to service the direct payment and then recharge continuing healthcare. But I'd have to double check my facts. I'm pretty confident on it, but I will check and let you know if I'm wrong.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next was workforce development.
I think that's back with Tyrone as well.
Sorry, Tyrone, you're not getting away anytime soon.
No, it's okay.
You're staying on.
It's okay. No, it's not a problem at all. I'm just quickly trying to find the mandate savings reference on.
My reading of that is that there's no intention to merge that team. It is specifically team reductions. If you're looking for that, Ty, I think it's around page. Oh no, I've
411. 411.
Okay, yeah, thank you. In terms of the savings and specifics around it, with the staffing, we'll have to undergo the exercise of looking at where we can get those efficiencies out of the workforce. I'm well aware of the unmet need, but that's multifaceted as well. We're all aware of the pressures in the care market at the moment around recruitment, retention, and so on and so forth. And with our own workforce, we are actively looking at vacancies rather than just going straight out for appointment, is reviewing those vacancies as to value for money, need, so on and so forth. And quite rightly so, is whether we can do things differently rather than traditionally, as soon as a vacancy comes up, we jump straight back into recruitment. Is that chance to just sit back a little bit and maybe take it as a positive in one way, whether we can reflect and look to improve the service going forward.
Thank you, Tyrone.
Thank you.
And community safety and CCTV, obviously, that would be Councillor Griffiths' portfolio, I believe. So,
no, Chair, it's mine. But I'm sorry.
Oh, it's yours. Sorry,
could you just repeat the question? Could you just repeat the question?
It was just that obviously we've had concerns over the summer about antisocial behaviour. Some of the CCTV cameras in the town centre haven't been pointing in the right way or recording the information that is needed to bring youngsters to book. And it was really about finding out about if we're going to make this a robust service, then how can we make that happen? I know there's a will to do it, and there's obviously, money put aside to actually beef it up a bit, really.
Thank you. Yes. Community safety is one of the areas where we propose to spend a little more. I think it's been historically under-resourced, and we are seeing certainly a need for additional resources in community safety. The CCTV partnerships in each town, we seem to have a multiplicity of CCTV systems in this county. We have the systems which are monitored, systems which are unmonitored, our mobile, and of course our own systems in our own buildings. So the proposal is to rationalise and improve and coordinate those CCTV systems.
I think that would be really welcomed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birch, Councillor Strong. Councillor Emma Bryn and Councillor Ian Chandler, I'm going to allow you both to come back.
Sorry, Councillor Dimmock, I did have a question about grassroots.
Oh, yes.
Or just somebody make a comment, really, to actually just what is the sort of plan, really?
Francis, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on that one. And so with regards to the grassroots service, in the budget mandate, we've proposed two options. Option A is to introduce an annual subscription charge. At the moment, if you join as a grassroots member, you pay once and then you don't pay for the service, again, in terms of a membership. So within the documentation, if you want to have a look at the details, page 299, it sets out the two options. The other option is to cease the service in its entirety. So there are two options proposed there. The one that we've recommended for consideration is option A, which is the introduction of an annual subscription, and it's a one-off payment for those members to join that service. We currently have a number of people who've subscribed to the service but don't actually use it as well. So hopefully we will then improve the number of actual users on that service.
Thank you, Francis. Councillor Emma Bryn.
Yeah, sorry, me again. I just wanted a little bit more detail, if I can, on the £550,000 set aside to fix Redbrook Bridge, footbridge, which is obviously it's an essential bridge for the people that lived in Redbrook and Penarth, as well as a vital link for the tourists. I just wanted to know just a little bit more detail on whether we know also if we know whether Gloucester County Council have got the funds to, because it's half and half, isn't it? It's half owned by us and half owned by Gloucester County Council, and whether they've confirmed that they also have their side of their funding for their half. And yeah, just a bit more detail if you can, please. Thank you.
Francis, are you okay to come in here?
Yes, no problem. So within the capital side of the budget, within that table set out on page 555 of the pack, you can see that we've identified the potential capital expenditure that we're likely to incur over 3 years. So for the Redbrook Rail Bridge refurbishment, that isn't for this financial year from April, it's for the next financial year. And yes, we're continuing our conversations with Gloucestershire with regards to their half. So those figures could change and would be something we'd need to consider in next year's budget setting process. So the key ones for consideration in this year are in column 1 for 23-24. We've set out the proposals there for you.
Okay, so it's been looked at and it's been decided that there's no work needed on it this year at all then? Because
not immediate work in this year, but we're very much anticipating needing to do the work in the next financial year. But obviously things can change, can't they? So it's always a difficult one that needs to just be constantly monitored.
Yeah, because it did lose a plank this year well, last year already, and people are concerned that it's going to tumble into the river, and that money set aside, is it that for a total refurbishment? So you're hoping it's going to last 12 months and then be totally refurbished, or is that just...
That's indicative at the moment in terms of what we think those costs may be, and obviously we do need to share those costs with Gloucestershire as well, so it's very much indicative for the next financial year rather than this financial year. But you're right, if anything changes in this year we would have to consider it, and it might mean that becomes more of a priority if something were to happen.
Lovely, thank you, Francis. Councillor Chandler.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, that's seeing those projected capital expenditures on maintenance on bridges and roads. It's quite eye-watering when you look at the years ahead. But my question was about to go back to grassroots, if you don't mind, Francis. I just want a clarity, because at the moment the £5 registration fee is per household. So will the £30 annual subscription be per household or per user? So there's a clarification there. But I suppose the other thing that I'm really concerned about is looking at the table of where the users are. The overwhelming majority are in Newport, Chepstow and Caldicot, which are areas that are already served with public transport. I just wondered what plans there are to actually promote it to users in other areas, particularly rural areas, which is what the original intention of the grassroots scheme was. And as part of that, could you let me know any indication of actually how many new registrations we get each year? I noticed that the page on the website's not been updated for several years. I just wondered, are we getting new? We promoted the service, or is this all historical? Those 4,000 registrations, do they all happen, 6 years ago, or are we still getting people coming in? So, because I do think it's a really important service, but it's one that needs to be better used and particularly used in rural areas.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. Councillor Francis.
With regards
Councillor Francis, sorry. I can tell it's getting too long, right? It's getting too late now. We're all exhausted. Do you want to become a councillor, Francis?
No,
okay, that's fine.
With regards to the grassroots service, I think it is very much something we would like to promote, and we would like to encourage people to utilise and sort of rebrand and re-advertise it, because you're right, its original intention was to provide accessibility for people across the rural areas of the authority to access that transport, and we do see that it's being utilised in areas where there are public bus services available, and that isn't what its intention was for. We do even have some people utilising the grassroots service to access work, and using it as a service much more like a taxi service rather than its original intention. The £30 proposed charge is per person rather than per household. And I missed one of your other questions, Councillor Chandler, so I'm sorry if I'm not sure what that other one was, sorry.
It was, yeah, okay, it was saying the original £5 registration fees per household, not user, but it was about how have we had many new registrations over the last few years, or are those 4,000 existing registrations, are they all quite old? And I suppose just following up a bit from you saying if it's £30 per user rather than per household, are you looking at concessionary rates, particularly for as part of that subscription?
So with regards to the number of users, I can get that up-to-date information for you, broken down in terms of the applications we've had over the years, because we have got a large percentage of people that are registered and have been on the registration and applied a long time ago. So I'll ask Deb and the team to provide you with that information and circulate that through to the Scrutiny Committee. Yes, I think there is consideration built into the mandate around concessionary and being able to apply that, so that's already built into the proposal.
Thank you, Francis, and thank you, Councillor Chandler. Councillor Louise Brown.
Yes, thank you. I think the questions that have just been asked are probably relevant, because obviously with regard to grassroots, I think Councillor Chandler said, in the Chepstow area, there is public transport. Well, in Mavon Village, which is near Chepstow, there's one Saturday bus, shopper's bus, and that's it. And I do know of a pensioner who uses the grassroots service to get out again, basically, for possibly the only other trip out of the village with grassroots, and she's only on a pension, so obviously any increase in charges would impact her, and I'd be interested to know about either breaking down those charges, not necessarily on an annual basis, but also about concessions with regard to that, because I think obviously with pensioner passes, then the public transport, if you're over 60, is covered, but it wouldn't be covered for a grassroots service. So, to suggest that even around a short distance away from Chepstow, there's plenty of public bus services, I'm afraid there just isn't. And and they do, and it is found to be a very useful service, and also for people of lower income as well. So I just wanted to add that point about looking at how you change that and to ensure that there were proper concessions. And earlier in the conversation, we were talking about Market Hall in Monmouth. I believe that Market Hall in Monmouth was used as a night shelter area. So, I mean, I think, it's a question of whether or not all of the assets should be looked at with regard to potential affordable housing. They're brownfield sites, and the advantage of often of those sites is that they are located fairly close to the centre and don't necessarily rely on public transport. For example, Seven View Care Home is very close to the centre of Chepstow. So with regard to Bridges, I am concerned about that, because I have visited Bridges Centre, and I appreciate that the work that they do there, which is very important for the community. And if the lease was negotiated, if it's a peppercorn rent at the moment, are there going to be proper grant facilities to actually cover any increase in the any rent, or in terms of its negotiation? I mean, I don't know whether they are able to apply for grants from Welsh Government or health care funding at all. So I think that has to be considered, because although I'm not in the Monmouth area, I do appreciate that it provides a very good service for residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So I think that's all the questions. Well done, everyone. I think we got through that. Sorry,
Chair. May I come back on Councillor Davis's query about the somewhat eye-watering total figures?
Yeah, of course.
Having just looked at them, they are very much a worst case scenario for a household who are using almost every conceivable service that they could be using in terms of calculating that total figure. It also assumes, so for instance, for that single parent household that was quoted, it assumes no council tax reduction, which I think was unlikely. It assumes no free school meals eligibility or anything of that kind. It also assumes, and I think this may be an error, in fact, that they use both home to school transport and preschool childcare, and I'm not entirely sure how you would manage to do that. So I think we may need to refine those figures.
Okay, thank you very much. So well done, members, well done, officers, and well done, cabinet members. I think you're all brilliant. We accept that and sympathise with the administration that these are very challenging times ahead for Monmouthshire Council and its communities. I'm really grateful for the quality of questioning and scrutiny today from members. That we talk in depth, we spoke in depth. Members seek reassurance that Monmouthshire will continue to remain a green place to live. There were questions around council tax calculations and how robust some of the savings published, the effect of transport to school increases, and the impact on households. There's obviously some concern around community services such as Gwent Music, libraries, leisure centres, and I think we all welcome the news of leisure centres staying open. Obviously some concern of the demographic that it will impact with shortening opening times. Councillor Bryn asks for some clarity on the position of Castlegate and Newport Retail Park. It was also raised about the question raised on instalment payments to help residents budget. There's also recommendations with regards to street lighting and lighting in buildings to help make savings, the care around learning disabilities and what those cuts mean. There's obviously a number of times raised the concern around asset disposal and how we go about that. People want some thorough scrutiny, so we don't look forward to those reports, but we want them to be scrutinised by the committees. And obviously, there's a very real financial pressure facing our residents, and it's our job to scrutinise it and make sure that we're delivering the best budget for them. I want to thank Councillor Garrick for coming to the meeting today, and you've done incredibly well answering so many questions. And I'd like to thank colleagues, and we will soon be debating this in full council. So thank you ever so much, everyone. You take care and have a good night. And Councillor Garrick, I hope your son is okay after his fall. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Good night.